So don't put your hands on me here. I'm going in this house.
No.
This is my home.
No, bro.
I'm going to go in here.
It's a wreck in here, yes. See?
Yeah, I want him to come in here. No, I'm not getting out, Eric.
No, get out. Get out. See,
I'm
my
not
dog.
Your dog ain't going to bite me.
No,
We're making Eric.
My dog, bro.
Mass evictions are skyrocketing as another sign of recession is here. Now, I found another data provider for evictions called Civil Court Data Initiative. As you guys may know, it has been incredibly frustrating trying to figure out what's going on with evictions because there's literally no data providers that track evictions. You guys can see from this map, they're barely even tracking anything. I've cross-referenced the Civil Court Data Initiative with Eviction Lab, and even Eviction Lab, when you see here, you can see how much of the United States is not being tracked for evictions. It's pretty alarming, actually. If you're wondering who the Civil Court Data Initiative is, the CCDI is a team of data engineers, data scientists, and researchers from the Legal Services Corporation, Office of Data Governance, and analysts. Through this initiative, we've created software that collects civil court records from over 1,200 counties in 30 U.S. states and territories. So they don't have everything, but at least we have a little bit more data. Now, when we look at the data and I show you guys the top 10 metro areas for filing rate is how many evictions per 100 households from November of 2024 to October of 2025. And as you guys can see here, the number one county is Clayton County, Georgia, with a filing rate of 39.13%, which means 39 out of 100 households that are renting file eviction. Absolutely astounding, guys. Now, Bronx is number 2 at 38.2%. Number 3 is Dillon, South Carolina, with 37.51%. And then North Carolina, Edgecombe at 36.11%. Pittsburgh City, Virginia is at 34.92%. Number 6 is Spartanburg, South Carolina at 33.51%. And then Richland, South Carolina at 31.43%. Cherokee, South Carolina at 30.64. There's 4 South Carolina counties on this list. I wonder if that has anything to do at all with Hurricane Helene. When we look at the top 3 counties for the actual filing unit amounts, it's absolutely astounding. Number 1 is Maricopa County, Arizona, which has 320,000 eviction filings. Absolutely mind-blowing. And we're going to dig into the top 3 markets here in a second to try to figure out if we can answer the question, why are they the top 3? Now, number 2 is Harris County. That's Houston, you guys. That's where I live. And they have right now 246,000 eviction filings. Absolutely outrageous. Bronx, New York is number 3 with 200,000 eviction filings. Looking at those top 3 metro areas, starting with the Maricopa County, one thing that they all have in common is the rent burden residence is over 50%. So the first one's at 51.2%. The national average is at 46%. But look at the trajectory. You can clearly see in this county that evictions have been going up post-lockdown, and they've been going up past pre-pandemic. But what is really frustrating is the data stops after February of 2025, so we can't even tell what's going on in this market. Another interesting thing about Maricopa County is the housing market is actually down 3.9% year over year. And it's not just the housing market, because the rental market is also down 0.4% year over year. Now, number 2 is Harris County, Texas. And you guys can see right above my head that the rent burden residents are 52.9%. Again, it's above the national average. Now, take a look at this data. Also, you can tell clearly that the evictions are getting out of control in Harris County and are above pre-pandemic. This goes back to 2016. But the really crazy thing here is the data just stops. They stopped reporting the data as of May of 2024. When we dig under the hood and look at their market, Harris County, the housing market is also down 3.7% year over year. The rental market is also down 0.9% year over year. However, the third metro, which is the Bronx, the first thing is obviously rent burden is the highest here at 59.7%. So it's extremely, extremely high. And by the way, this data is still reporting. So the ones that were getting worse are no longer reporting. But when we look at this data, it looks like evictions are going down. So I'm asking myself, how can that be? Because when we look at the housing market stats, this county is actually up year over year by 3.9%, and the rental market is also up 0.6% year over year. So there has to be another reason for high evictions. And I'm wondering if the reason these numbers are like that is because Bronx County has the highest rate of citizens leaving. They've lost 7.2% of their population in the last 3 years. So it might have something to do with it. Either way, Mitch, it's been incredibly frustrating trying to find, number one, just data to begin with, and then trying to find data that we can lean on and trust. Because according to that data, while some metros are getting worse, clearly with evictions, possibly other metros are not getting worse. So it's very, very confusing. And so, Mitch, first of all, go into the data and the lack of it if you'd like to, but do you believe that the eviction trends are just going to get worse?
They're going to get a lot worse. And the reason why, those numbers that Travis quoted, one of them, I believe, was Clayton, Georgia, over 37%. Well, isn't it interesting that the data we've been publishing for the last 11 months under the home affordability that we figured out what it was 37.8% of the households are going to lose the roof over their head and or go bankrupt. And isn't it interesting? That's our number is 37.8. In Clayton, Georgia, and many of those others, it's above 35. That's very close. Well, let's put some real numbers behind that percentage. So 37.8% of the household population across the United States is roughly 42 million houses. If you simply assumed that 20% are going to be evicted, do you realize that that's over 8 million households are going to get evicted? See the problem? This is going to get much worse. And the reason why is the home affordability. It's clear, and we've graphed it. We've put it in multiple articles on my website. When you start adding all the expenses that a household has to go part of their operating budget, and then you look at the inflation on top of that, the household incomes didn't keep up with it. And that's why so many people are in harm's way of going bankrupt or losing the roof over their head. It's the home affordability, the majority of which, as a sideline of all of this, is the real estate tax. The real estate tax, give or take, across the United States is 9 to 10% of the effective gross income per household. It's not what you're being told at 2% of the value of the house. That 2% turns into roughly 9% of your effective gross income. If you had that money in your pocket, how many of these people would be, in fact, going bankrupt? Most of those people are going to go bankrupt over $7,000. That's the only thing that stands between them and going bankrupt. You've got to repeal the real estate tax across the board in favor of the uniform states sales tax. That's why these people are getting evicted, other than the first guy that he showed on the video, which clearly has some psychological problems. There's lease violations, there's health code violations. There's plenty of reasons for that eviction, but the vast majority of people aren't like that.
One other issue with the rental market is it's still priced way too high relative to income growth. A lot of people have been fixated on the housing market as far as purchasing a home and getting a mortgage. And a lot of people have stopped talking about the rental market because it's so much cheaper generally right now in this market. It's so much cheaper to rent versus own. Now, the problem with that is pushing a lot more people to rent. And because a lot more people are choosing to rent right now versus to own right now, because it just doesn't make sense to own, mostly doesn't make sense to own right now, it's allowing a floor under the price of rent to be created. Once home affordability improves, hopefully everything will get better and the market will become more affordable. Now, obviously, we'll get to the property taxes here in a second. I'll show the viewers median household income. But before I get there, Mitch, I want to go over 3 different videos of people that are talking about various evictions. The first video is of a government employee that's going to talk about the evictions going up as a direct result of the government lockdowns. The second video is of a 90-year-old woman that's getting evicted, because we have to understand as a society, you and I, literally, and Mitch, and anyone that's watching this, if we see someone that's elderly in need, we have to help them. The last video is of a mother and 6 children that are also getting evicted. And make no mistake, you guys, it's getting really ugly out there for a lot of Americans.
Officially started the eviction process for a lot of people because of the government shutdown. And in case y'all don't understand just how deep it actually is, even if the workers were to start getting paid right now, today again, y'all do know that they still got to pay back pay for like at least this past month or a month and a half that they haven't been able to pay their bills, let alone rent. So when you think about it, yes, understand just how bad it must be for people to expect that you will continue working without pay. But do you not understand what it's like to get paid eventually again and have to figure out all this stuff that you about to owe from when you couldn't pay? People are losing their vehicles that they already been robbing Peter to pay Paul to make payment on before the government shut down. Now they just gonna lose it all together and probably not even gonna have enough for a down payment to get another one because the credit gonna be shot.
Hello.
You might not expect a 98-year-old woman to answer her own door, but Mary Phillips does. She's lived in this Dolores Street apartment for 50 years.
I've been very happy here, and I've always paid my rent. I've never been late.
But Phillips doesn't know how long she'll be able to stay here. The building's owners have evicted her.
I didn't sit down and cry. I just kind of refused to believe it. I was just thought, well, they're going to have to take me out of here feet first.
Phillips says she has nowhere else to go, and now she and her attorneys are fighting the eviction.
I am too old. I'm crowding 100, and I'm too old to pack up and leave. I'll just kick the bucket right here.
For now, she continues to live her life. And in case you think her age might cause her to cave in and decide to move, think again.
Just because of your age, don't let people push you around.
So, this has happened. I have been in and out of court with a complex called Blue Harmony. I've been talking to you all kind of vaguely about it. I was at work today and I got a phone call from my daughter telling me that the marshals were here. And even though I filed a writ to stop the eviction from happening, I filed an appeal, got the documents notarized. I still was told by the lieutenant that was just here that still wasn't in the system. That's not the finalization of the documents. So myself and my 6 children have been put out, not because we won't pay, but because I said I will not pay more than what we're supposed to pay. Because I asked for the home to be decent and in order, not to have a rodent infestation, to ask for your toilet to be working, to ask for your stove to work. It seems to be too much.
Mitch, every once in a while I hear comments that we always talk about property taxes this, property taxes that. But could you please just, again, for the viewers, can you just tie all of this together and explain? First of all, if you want to respond to any of those 3 videos, please do that. That was in a plethora of different situations. But how does removing property taxes, how is that potentially one of the best ways to reduce and stop evictions? How does removing property taxes slow down potentially stopping evictions completely? How does that work, Mitch? Can you tell us, please?
Evictions wouldn't occur but for the fact that the rental payments aren't being made. So why are the rental payments not being made? Well, that's right back to the home affordability chart that we created. Between the car loans, health insurance, private loans, school loans, mortgage, depending on what your interest rate is, and flipping into a new interest rate versus a more expensive interest rate versus a cheaper interest rate. All these things stack up. And then on top of that, you layer what the Federal Reserve has done. So one of the points that Travis touched on was inflation and cost. If you have a new apartment building as compared to what I could build just a few years ago, I would build for $185,000 per unit. Right now, today, that $185,000 is $305,000 per unit. That $100,000 spread is $115,000. spread is the equivalent of give or take of an extra $1,000 per month, where the median household income didn't go up to stay even with the inflation. So who created the inflation? Well, the answer is the US Treasury at the behest of the Federal Reserve. When they printed $26 trillion, de facto, they created a fraud. See, when you print money and it's not backed by an asset, that's called counterfeiting, first thing. Second thing is it's a hidden tax. Third thing is it creates inflation. When it creates inflation, then you end up at the exact same point where 37% of the household population, 37.8, are not going to make it. They're going to get foreclosed on, or they're going to lose the roof over their head unless something serious and dramatic changes. Then you add on to what the Federal Reserve has done and the US Treasury, and you add on to that what the central appraisal districts have done on behalf of their ownership, which are the school districts. The central appraisal districts, we have caught them. They have committed fraud on the public. They have equity stripped mom and pop. The money you would normally get out of your mortgage has literally been equity stripped and flipped into their pockets by virtue of the overtaxation and overvaluation at the hands of the central appraisal districts. They're caught. It's not debatable. What we have is irrefutable evidence, to the point that even the courts have admitted fraud occurred. You add those two elements together, add the Federal Reserve and add the central appraisal districts, you now have the two largest purveyors of fraud in the United States staring straight at you. So then the question becomes, what can be done? Well, the only answer is to repeal all property tax in favor of the uniform states sales tax. And that is what creates taxation that is fair and uniform, none of which is occurring. I don't care if you're in California or in Texas or New Jersey or Florida. The taxation is not fair. It is not uniform. There is no law as far as what is going on here, because we've proven that they're acting as such. There is no law. And if there is no law and there's no uniformity of application of the law, that leads to the fraud, and that leads to millions of people being thrown out on the street.
Yeah. Well, speaking of fraud and speaking of people being thrown out on the street, another set of data that's been very frustrating and very mixed, one painting a picture, it's not too bad, the other painting a big picture of problems, is bankruptcy data. So I want to go into the bankruptcy data, Mitch, and then I'm going to show you how off and how different the bankruptcy data is as well. I mean, you can't get accurate data, and that's been a huge problem at sounding the alarm. I mean, we got to go in, we got to go into the hood, we got to figure out what's going on, and we got to use the math. But even when you go under the hood and you start to see that even the math is fraud, I mean, it's not easy to put all of this together. Coming out in October, total bankruptcy filings did increase by 10%. There were 249,000 individual Chapter 7 bankruptcies that were filed for the first 9 months of 2025. That represents a 15% increase year over year. The total bankruptcy filings for the first 9 months of this year is 423,053. So if we kind of look at that, we can say probably that there's going to be about 600,000 bankruptcies, maybe about 600,000 bankruptcies this year. This article is pointing out the sharp rise in individual bankruptcy filings this September compared to 2024 highlights the mounting financial pressure on households across the country. Well, yes, we obviously agree with that. With household debts climbing, lending terms tightening, and geopolitical uncertainty creating challenges within supply chains, bankruptcies continue their ascent towards pre-pandemic levels. So I wanted to point out, you guys, we're not even at pre-pandemic levels. Here's the chart right here going back to 2004. And it's really interesting to point out that 2005 had the highest amount of bankruptcies, and we didn't even go into recession until 3 years later. So in other words, bankruptcies aren't necessarily a sign of a recession, but it is certainly a sign of consumers struggling. And this also may be low because people are just not going bankrupt. They're just wallowing in all of their debt and collections, or just trying to kick the can down the road. So even if we have 600,000 this year, you guys, that's still not necessarily where we were at in 2019. And the reason I'm pointing that out is because there's going to be a lot more incoming pain. But here's the really strange thing. When we go to the US debt clock, it's actually showing less bankruptcies at 553,602. Another really interesting thing is when I look at all 50 states, it's saying the bankruptcies are double than what's being reported to the public right now. They're saying, this site is saying that there's not 600,000, there's 1.39 million bankruptcies right now, which would be kind of comparable to the global financial crisis if this was true and the other data was not. Household debt is skyrocketing. So even if we don't have the bankruptcies, we have way more debt as household debt hits 18.59 trillion. And the problem is people can't pay that. The real median household income is only $83,730. And when we go back to 2019, the median household income adjusted for inflation was $83,260, which means in 5 years, Americans are only making $500 more in 5 years. So all the corporations continue to get filthy rich. The cost of living continues to explode, and we're only making $500 more median in 5 years. Talk about absolute lunacy. Mitch, can you go into inflation a little more and explain how this current round of inflation is really just creating a Great Depression?
Think of it this way. The median household income does not exist to carry the outstanding interest on the fraudulent bond debt. So there's no doubt that the bonds were created. They were sold based on a debt rating that isn't even real. The bonds are sub-junk, for which they say are double B and double A with regard to the school districts. But that same problem continues no matter where you are. The median household income, mathematically speaking, nobody on this planet can get blood out of a stone. So mathematically speaking, if the median household income doesn't exist to carry the principal and to carry the interest and keep it going, what solution could there be but for printing more money, driving the interest rates down, kicking the can down the road? And as I keep saying, the people who should know better do not want to discuss the pink elephant dancing in the middle of the room, which is the outstanding compound cumulative interest on the debt. And we just published a document about 10 days ago on my website. We found an original document of 320 some odd pages from the California Process Center. And we tied what they had come up with in 2015 to the state of Texas. Isn't it interesting that in 2015, after a 14-year study, they realized that the capital appreciation bonds for California were, quote, toxic. Here we are, 2025, state of Texas, all the evidence under the sun showing that fraud has been committed. Median household income does not exist to pay off the debt at the school district level or anything else for that matter, because there's too many layers of loans. There's too many layers of debt. So when you add all this up, what is the solution? Well, obviously, repeal all real estate tax in favor of the uniform state sales tax to create a uniform and equal application of the law on taxation. Job one. Job two, recognize the pink elephant dancing in the room. These debts have got to go. These bond debts will not be paid off. So you may as well recognize it and deal with it before the market wakes up one day and drives the market down several thousand points in a day. That will happen unless somebody steps up and says, okay, we're going to peel this back. We're going to get this fraud out of here, at least to the point where it is sustainable. And give or take, what's that number on the school district level? If you were going to keep the real estate tax, which is stupid, but if you were, the answer would be somewhere around 13 cents on the dollar, mathematically speaking. Then it becomes somewhat sustainable. However, here's the bigger problem. No school district in the United States should have access to the bond market ever again. They have proven their criminality. They cannot be trusted. Not now, not ever. Do you know that there's school districts here in Texas, Richardson in particular, that have admitted that they're going to lose 9,000 students? They've got a shrinking population. Yet they just sold $1.5 billion worth of additional fraudulent bonds. The problem is that mom and pop and society does not yet understand what's happening under the hood. And I want to take that up one more level to those people who are in charge, those politicians. Think this through. A handful of people, just a handful, shut down the bonds in Johnson County. 100%. Just a handful of people. That shows the power of the public. Mom and pop, when they get involved and understand what's going on. There are a lot of people that don't understand. They go about their lives, they haven't got a clue what's happening. But nonetheless, this math is real. These people cannot afford the roof over their head. They cannot afford their debts. They cannot afford the fraud created at the school districts, which, by the way, is mail fraud. They cannot stand the fraud that's created at the central appraisal districts, which is property overvaluation and overtaxation. So that's kind of a long answer to a short question, but the reality is it's the pink elephant dancing in the room. It's the fraudulent debt. It must be dealt with. And it's going to take mom and pop's involvement in mass to get this done. It's going to take finally the nationwide press paying attention, but they won't do that without mom and pop hammering on them on emails. The politicians, honestly, brain dead. There's no other way to explain it. You don't want to discuss it. Therefore, if you don't want to discuss it and help your constituents, why in the world do you have a position in office? A lot of these people go. And again, this is up to mom and pop. You've got to get involved. You have to realize the truth. And people do recognize the problem. They can't afford it. They can't articulate it. When you get them into a position where they can articulate it, then we've got real power. And it's coming. I mean, we've got people reaching out from across the states. Yeah. But these things have to be done.
Speaking about helping the public understand and helping them figure out what's really happening under the hood, I want to conclude the video by giving you guys a quick update on what we plan on doing with the advocacy. Now, obviously, we're working on a separate website. We're trying to build just one centralized website. But in the meantime, as we're doing that, I'm going to go back to my website and Real Estate Mindset, and I'm going to be creating a couple more tabs. One tab is going to be specifically for the school district boards, and we're going to put as much info on that tab as possible so that you as mom and pop understand how to fight the school board. And then I'm going to have a tab on the ARB board or the appraisal review board. Obviously, we have lawsuits there. We got $250,000 off some people's house and help them through that process. So we'll have that there. We're doing as much as we can right now, you guys, but at the end of the day, there is only one way to get to the solution, and that is a mass rally. There's going to be a time where Mitch and I call on you through the advocacy that we're creating to rally with us, because one thing Mitch and I always talk about and have equally come to this conclusion: we cannot trust the politicians to get the job done. The people must demand the change, and we plan on trying to lead you through that. It's very hard, you guys. It's very hard. We're just two people. We need some help. Email us if you can help. And other than that, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to go to the links. Mitch, I really appreciate you. Happy Monday. And if you're out there investing in real estate yourself, the economy, the stock market, whatever it is, you guys already know we wish you luck and we hope you win.